They say that your medical history is the key to your future health. For me, that history was a carefully constructed fiction, a 28-year-long lie woven by the person who was supposed to protect me most, my mother. The moment the doctor spoke the words, genetic marker, my life began to unravel, not because of the diagnosis itself, but because of the chilling, immediate realization that my mother had consciously risked my life to bury a decades-old secret about my biological father. I had spent my entire life trusting her love, believing it to be the purest, most selfless force in my universe. I would soon discover that her love was, in fact, conditional on my complete ignorance and my perfect health. My name is Charlotte, and I was 28 when my seemingly robust, healthy life was catastrophically interrupted by a persistent and debilitating medical mystery. It started with simple yet agonizing fatigue, the kind that no amount of sleep could remedy, followed quickly by inexplicable joint pain, particularly in my knees and ankles, and unusual recurring infections that my body seemed unable to shake off. I was constantly battling a low-grade fever and a crushing exhaustion that made even simple tasks like carrying groceries or climbing stairs feel like running a marathon. My local family doctor, unable to pinpoint a cause after months of standard blood work, referred me to a specialist, Dr. Hayes, a renowned geneticist known for handling complex and rare autoimmune disorders. Dr. Hayes suspected a rare, complex, and potentially life-threatening autoimmune disorder with a strong hereditary component. The first, most critical step in his diagnostic process was a detailed, comprehensive analysis of my family's complete medical history, especially my paternal lineage. I cheerfully compiled everything I knew. My father, David, was robustly healthy, a kind, steady man who worked as a high school principal. Both of his parents, my paternal grandparents, were alive and healthy well into their 80s. The family history as I presented it was clean, unremarkable, and purely of Northern European descent. David was my rock, the predictable, safe anchor in my life. My mother, Eleanor, was the emotional center, sometimes overly anxious and meticulous about small details, but always devoted to my well-being. I provided Dr. Hayes with my official medical file, a thick stack of papers spanning from my birth through my early 20s. The file listed David as my father and contained a clean, unremarkable family history. The only oddity I recalled was the unusual difficulty I had in obtaining the records. My mother insisted on handling the initial request from our childhood pediatrician, citing her familiarity with the old practices archive system. I found that behavior strange at the time, given how simple digital transfers usually are, but I dismissed it as her usual need to control important bureaucratic details. Little did I know, that moment of strange insistence was the first piece of evidence in the biggest conspiracy of my life. Dr. Hayes called me back 2 weeks later, and his voice on the phone was serious, clinical, and grave. "Charlotte, the genetic markers we found are very distinct. Based on your symptoms and blood work, we are looking at a severe form of familial Mediterranean fever, or FMF, a condition that is entirely hereditary. It requires 2 carrier parents, or a parent with the full disease. Your current symptoms are already significant, and we need to start aggressive, life-stabilizing treatment immediately. But here is the profound, urgent problem. The markers we see are incredibly rare in your reported ancestry. They are almost exclusively found in a specific population group, Middle Eastern and Mediterranean ancestry. He paused, letting the clinical weight of the statement settle. Your official medical records, the ones you provided from your childhood and your father's side, show absolutely no indication of this lineage. In fact, they suggest a purely Northern European background. We need to re-examine your paternal history. Is there any possibility, Charlotte, that David is not your biological father? The question hit me like a physical blow, a sudden brutal shock that stole the breath from my lungs. The possibility had never once crossed my mind. My mother and David had a loving, if occasionally turbulent marriage. I resembled David, or so I always believed, in my height and my quiet reserve. I vehemently denied the possibility, insisting that the records must be wrong or the genetic test must be flawed. But Dr. Hayes was insistent. The markers were indisputable, the disease progressive, and the need for information was immediate. We needed to find my biological father's complete medical records to fully understand the full genetic risk and tailor my treatment. If my biological father carried a more severe, active variant of the disease, the necessary treatment plan would change drastically, requiring more severe, aggressive interventions. My life, my future was, quite literally, hanging on a thread of genetic truth my mother held captive. I went home, my mind reeling in a thick, cold fog of denial and dread. I couldn't confront David. He was too frail and too kind to handle such a devastating question, especially one that implied an old infidelity on my mother's part. I decided to confront my mother, Eleanor, first and alone, hoping against all reason for a simple, reasonable explanation, an accidental paperwork mix-up, an old family secret about a distant adopted relative. I found my mother in the kitchen, calmly preparing dinner, the picture of domestic normalcy, an image that felt suddenly sickeningly false. I placed Dr. Hayes's report on the counter, pointing to the damning sentence about the genetic markers and the incompatible ancestry. Mom, Dr. Hayes says this disease comes from Middle Eastern ancestry. Our family records show nothing like that. He thinks David isn't my father. What is the truth? Please just tell me if there's a family history I don't know about. I need to know this to get treatment. Eleanor's face went immediately pale, her hands trembling so violently that the knife she was holding clattered to the floor. Her perfect composure instantly shattered, replaced by a look of profound, terrified guilt. She collapsed into a chair, her eyes wide with a desperate, terrifying awareness that her decades-long secret was out. I can't tell you, Charlotte. I can't. It will destroy everything. David, our family, I insisted, my voice rising with raw fear and urgent desperation. It is destroying me, Mom. I have a serious progressive disease that I cannot treat properly because of this secret. My life is in immediate, significant danger. Forget David for one moment and tell me the truth. That's when she dropped the first, horrifying layer of the truth. David is your father, legally. He loves you as his own, but biologically, no, he's not. She admitted to a brief, intense affair that happened years ago, before she and David were married, a whirlwind fling with a man she met while traveling abroad. I was conceived during that brief, ill-advised encounter. That man was my biological father. David, desperately in love with Eleanor and eager to marry her and start a family, agreed to raise me as his own, swearing to never reveal the secret to anyone. It was a classic tale of youthful indiscretion and a painful pact of silence. But the next part of her confession was what truly broke me, shifting the narrative from a sad affair to a cold, life-threatening crime. "The medical records," she began, her voice barely a whisper, thick with tears and guilt. "When you were 5, you had a routine checkup. The pediatrician noted some unusual blood markers, anomalies in your complete blood count. Nothing definitive, but he suggested we check David's records to rule out anything hereditary." She stopped, her eyes filling with a genuine terror I had never seen. I panicked, Charlotte. I knew if he checked David's clean, standard Northern European records, the doctor would immediately suspect an alternate paternity, and the whole secret would unravel. David would leave me, and our world would collapse. So I went to the office manager, an old financially struggling friend of mine, and I offered her money, a lot of money, more than she made in a year. She confessed that she had paid her friend to completely create a false, backdated medical file for me. The new file, meticulously constructed, omitted any mention of the unusual blood markers and, most damningly, changed my stated paternal history to one that was entirely fabricated, listing David's extended family as the source of my genetics. She removed any and every trace of my real biological lineage. I told myself it was just to protect our family, Charlotte. To protect David, to protect our life. I never thought it was a serious illness. I thought it was just a fluke. It was a one-time thing, just to get the doctor off the paternity trail. But the lie wasn't a one-time thing. It was a permanent, life-threatening distortion that persisted for over 2 decades. The pediatrician's blood markers at age 5 were almost certainly the first subtle signs of the FMF. By changing my records, she didn't just hide my biological father. She actively prevented any future doctor from diagnosing the disease for 23 years. Every medical professional who reviewed my file based their assessment on the fabricated history, dismissing my intermittent symptoms throughout my childhood and early adulthood as mere fatigue, stress, or minor viral infections. My life had been actively clinically sabotaged by the woman who raised me, all to protect a family unit built on a foundation of lies and convenience. The fury that surged through me was cold, intense, and absolute. It wasn't the affair that mattered. It was the clinical, calculated risk she took with my life. "You gambled with my health to protect your marriage? You let me get progressively sicker for 2 decades, enduring pain and fever because you were afraid David would leave you? You chose your reputation over my life?" I was screaming now, the high-pitched sound echoing in the silent house, shattering the silence of the night. She was sobbing uncontrollably, begging for forgiveness, trying to claim it was the ultimate act of desperate, misguided love. But I couldn't see love. I only saw selfish, monstrous cowardice. My priority immediately became my survival. I called Dr. Hayes and confessed everything, the shame and shock momentarily overridden by the sheer primal urgency of my health. He was visibly shaken, his professional calm completely broken by the revelation of the criminal deception. This is a profound breach of medical ethics and trust, Charlotte. This requires an immediate, full reassessment of your case. We need to find your biological father now. His genetics are the only way to determine the severity of your prognosis and the correct course of treatment. The information your mother deliberately destroyed is the key to your survival. I demanded the full identity of my biological father. Eleanor was hysterical, resisting fiercely, still clinging to the secrecy. I can't tell you his name. He's a powerful man now, married with a perfect family. He promised me he would never reveal it, and I promised him the same. His life would be ruined. The powerful man, the promise of secrecy, it confirmed that the affair was more than a casual fling. It was a high-stakes pact that both parties ruthlessly protected. I made it clear, if she did not provide the name and all known medical information, I would go to the police and the medical board, exposing her felony act of medical fraud, an act that had undeniably endangered my life. Faced with the immediate prospect of legal ruin, criminal investigation, and public disgrace, she finally, utterly broke. She revealed his name, Dr. Elias Kanian. He was a brilliant, wealthy cardiologist, now living in a neighboring state, known nationally for his philanthropic work and his seemingly perfect family. His ancestry, she confessed, was Lebanese, the exact Middle Eastern lineage Dr. Hayes had mentioned. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clinical precision. My biological father was a doctor, a man who swore to uphold the Hippocratic Oath, and my mother, fearing the truth, had created a medical lie that put her own daughter in mortal danger. My confrontation with Elias Kanian was meticulously planned by Dr. Hayes and my new attorney, whom I hired specifically to navigate this complex medical legal nightmare. The first step was a civil, non-threatening request for genetic testing. Dr. Hayes, citing my rare genetic illness and the crucial need for paternal history to ensure a life-saving treatment plan, sent a formal HIPAA-compliant request to Dr. Kanian's office. The letter explained that a probable genetic offspring was in life-threatening need of his critical medical information. We did not mention my mother, Eleanor, or the affair. Dr. Kanian's immediate reaction was a furious denial, followed by icy resistance. He called Dr. Hayes, demanding to know the source of this libelous, outrageous claim. Dr. Hayes, bound by ethical and professional standards, only reiterated the medical necessity and the severity of my condition. Dr. Kanian, a man accustomed to absolute control and a pristine reputation, must have felt the walls closing in. He contacted his own high-powered attorney, but the medical urgency was unassailable. The law unequivocally protects a child's right to life-saving medical information. Faced with a potential court order that would inevitably expose the affair and the resulting child, he finally conceded to an anonymous genetic marker test. The results came back quickly, confirming the biological link. Elias Kanian was my father. With the genetic information finally confirmed, Dr. Hayes was able to identify the specific aggressive variant of FMFI possessed. The treatment changed immediately, shifting from mild, ineffective medication to a severe regimen of chemotherapy-level drugs to suppress the aggressive inflammation destroying my joints and organs. The 23 years of misdiagnosis had caused irreversible damage, including kidney and organ scarring. But at least now I had a chance at arresting the disease's progression. The next confrontation was purely personal, driven by a profound need for justice and honesty. I drove to Dr. Kanian's city and requested a private meeting, ensuring my attorney was present. He met me in his attorney's office, a sterile, intimidating environment. He was exactly as my mother described, handsome, powerful, and radiating an aura of polished, controlling authority. He looked at me, a stranger who was genetically his, and the shock in his eyes was palpable. I looked like him, specifically in the set of my eyes and the dark curl of my hair. "I am Charlotte," I stated, placing a copy of the genetic test and my severe FMF diagnosis on the table. "I am your daughter, and I am dying because your secrecy and my mother's cowardice led to 2 decades of misdiagnosis." He didn't flinch, but his polished facade visibly cracked. He was terrified, not of me, but of the ruin I represented to his carefully manicured world. He confessed the affair instantly, explaining it as a moment of youthful, foolish passion that ended when Eleanor moved on and married David. He admitted that Eleanor had called him years ago, vaguely mentioning medical concerns and asking him to trust her to handle it. He never asked for details, choosing convenient, cowardly ignorance over messy, moral responsibility. You had an ethical and moral obligation to disclose your medical history, especially when a doctor called you and requested information, I accused him, my voice trembling with contained rage. You chose your reputation, your perfect family image over my life. You, a cardiologist who vows to save lives, chose to let your own daughter suffer a preventable, progressive illness for 20 years. He offered money immediately, a foundation in my name, a blank check for my care, anything to silence me and keep his perfect, public life intact. I refused the money, telling him the only thing I truly wanted was for him to tell his children the truth about their half-sister and the genetic risk they carried, information that was now critical for their own health. He refused, citing his wife's fragility and his children's stability. He was, in the end, just as profoundly cowardly and selfish as my mother. I left the meeting knowing that my biological father was a moral hypocrite, a man who built a career on saving lives while casually endangering his own daughters. But I had the truth, and I had the treatment plan. The final and most painful confrontation was with my mother. I returned home, emotionally drained but armed with the unvarnished, complete truth. I sat her down and showed her the documentation proving Elias Kanian was my father. I didn't yell. I spoke with a quiet, devastating finality. "You didn't just hide my father, Mom. You committed a felony that nearly killed me. You changed my medical history, and because of your choice, I have irreversible damage. Dr. Hayes says I will battle this for the rest of my life. You did this." She was hysterical, clinging to me, begging me to understand that she loved me, that she only did it to keep our family whole. "If David had known, he would have left me. I did it for us, Charlotte. It was love." I rejected her love instantly. "Your love was a lie that put my life at risk. I cannot, will not forgive that." I made the only decision I could to protect my future and ensure accountability. I filed a formal complaint with the medical board against her friend, the office manager, and I initiated a civil lawsuit against my mother for medical malpractice and criminal fraud. The lawsuit was the ultimate necessary act of self-preservation. It made the situation public, exposing the calculated years-long deception to the world. David, my legal father, was utterly devastated when the full truth came out. He was heartbroken not by the affair, which he had long ago forgiven, but by Eleanor's conscious, criminal decision to endanger my life and involve him, unknowingly, in a massive lie. He filed for divorce immediately. He was the only person in this whole nightmare who showed genuine, selfless grief and honor. He was angry at Eleanor, but heartbroken for me. He maintained his paternal love for me, the only true, unconditional love I found in the wreckage of my life, The legal proceedings were brutal, public, and protracted. Eleanor was stripped of her reputation and her marriage. She lost the lawsuit, facing steep fines and public humiliation. Her friend, the office manager, lost her license and faced severe criminal charges. Elias Kanian, my biological father, avoided the lawsuit by making a massive, legally binding donation to a national FMF research foundation in my name, a public-facing but anonymous mea culpa that ensured his name was kept out of the divorce and fraud proceedings. His reputation was bruised but intact. I, the patient, was left with a devastating, progressive illness, but a clear, honest future. I received a significant settlement which I immediately put towards my lifelong medical care. I legally changed my name, adopting the maiden name of my mother's family, Charlotte Eleanor Thompson, to sever all ties to the Holloway deception and the Kanian betrayal. The emotional distance from my mother, Eleanor, is permanent. She calls and sends letters begging for reconciliation, but I cannot risk her brand of selfish love again. I keep David, my adoptive father, in my life. He is my true father in every sense that matters, visiting weekly and providing the quiet, steady support that my mother's chaotic passion never provided. He apologized to me, not for the secret he kept, but for his failure to ask more questions about my health over the years. That was the only sincere apology I ever received. The most profound shift came in my perspective on my health. I am no longer fighting a mysterious illness. I am fighting FMF, a known enemy with a specific genetic lineage. I am an advocate now, raising awareness for rare genetic diseases and the crucial importance of honest medical records. I speak openly about my journey, using my story not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to survival. I am in touch with the FMF community, and through them, I have connected with people who share my rare Middle Eastern genetic markers, a strange, unexpected connection to the cultural roots my mother tried so desperately to bury. I often think about the irony. My mother tried to save her marriage with David by lying about my genetics, a lie that almost killed me. In the end, the lie destroyed the marriage anyway, and the pursuit of the medical truth saved my life. Her act of selfish love cost her everything she cherished, while my act of radical honesty, the pursuit of truth over family secrecy, gave me a second chance at life. The pain of the past remains, a dull ache in my joints and a permanent scar on my heart, but it no longer defines me. I am defined by the resilience I found in facing down the biggest lie of my life. I am alive, I am treated, and my future is finally built on the undeniable truth of my own genetics and my own strength.